Welcome to Locality's Making Bank podcast, where we continue our exploration of South Florida's entrepreneurial landscape with host Keith Costello, co-founder and CEO of Locality Bank. Sit back, relax, and let South Florida visionaries guide you on an entrepreneurial journey from tribulation to triumph, sharing the very stories that have shaped them.
Okay, Jaime Sturgis, welcome to Locality Bank's Making Bank podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was not easy getting Jaime. You know, he's a busy guy. I think we've been trying to get him for like 3 years, but we finally got him. So we're excited about that. We're also excited because he's a client of the bank and big supporter of the bank, investor, client, everything that we want every local business to be. So thank you for supporting Locality, first of all.
Absolutely. Thank you for making it so easy.
All right. Good to hear. So the way we usually start off, we just kind of talk a little about your beginnings, you know, where you grew up. And then I always like to kind of touch on, you know, most entrepreneurs, it kind of starts when they're young and kind of go there, like your family and that type of thing. So where did you grow up?
Sure. So born and raised in Fort Lauderdale. So hence the name of the company, Native Realty. I went to school at Pinecrest, then I went to school at Florida State, and then came back down and started my career in Winwood, and then eventually came back to Fort Lauderdale full circle.
Yeah. So, and growing up in your family, what was that like?
It was great. So my parents are both very entrepreneurial. My father started a company called Sound Advice with a couple friends. They all dropped out of college, moved down here from Michigan and started that company in the 70s. So both my parents worked together. So I had the fortune of, you know, sitting in the back of the car and on the way to and from school, listening to lots of, you know, phone calls and conversations and kind of understanding the dynamics of multiple industries. So Sound Advice was one of them. And then they went into like building yachts, offshore yachts years later. So my father would go and commission them in Taiwan. And then when they would come over, my mom was an interior designer and she would like do all of the fit outs and, you know, fit and finish inside of them. So they worked very closely. They were amazing role models, right? I mean, not only did they work seamlessly together, which, you know, a lot of people can't even stay married, but, you know, they stayed happily married to this day, best friends, partners, inspiration in so many ways. But I also really loved and respected the way that they prioritized my brother and I. Every night home for dinner, phones off, you know, at whatever it was, 5:36, you know, we'd all sit together, run through what happened in the day. We were always their top priority, which I love and respect. And I'm focused on now instilling into our family, you know, moving forward with my children and my wife.
Wow. I mean, that is an incredible lesson right there for everybody, because it can be all consuming when you're starting a business.
Yeah.
It's very easy to just get drawn in and forget about your family.
Especially nowadays, right? Because everything is like instantaneous, on demand. I mean, you know, I have clients that if I don't respond to them in like 30 minutes, you know, the world is on fire. It's like, what are you doing? Like, why, you know, what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, you know, it's like 10:30 on a Sunday. Like, can we talk tomorrow type thing? But yeah, it's interesting. I think that some of the societal pressures on entrepreneurs in this day and age, because of how interconnected everything is and how instantaneous the response has become, and sort of society almost expects it in some degree. In my industry, at least, you know, it's like I use the analogy, it's like being a doctor where people expect you to be on call all the time. And when millions of dollars are on the line, you sort of have to, right? And sort of placate to egos and all those type of things and make yourself available. And if you don't, then sometimes the other person will, and you'll lose the business. So it's a delicate balance of trying to strike balance between, you know, family life and also servicing clients and you know, getting the job done and deal across the finish line.
Yeah. And I mean, so the fact that your parents demonstrated that for you, that's a great lesson.
It was amazing.
And yet, you know, because a lot of people talk about balance, and some people say, you know, balance is a myth. There is no balance. You got to really go all in. Yeah. Either you can be a great family man or a woman, or you can be a great businessman or woman, but you can't do both. And, you know, but I have talked to a lot of people who've done both, but it's not easy, and it does take a lot of skill. And the fact that you had, you know, an example of it
Right.
is great.
And to clarify, I am certainly not a master of this craft yet. It's something I'm actively working towards. Right. But I started the business before I had children, which helped too. Right. So I could be 24/7 in it for several years before I had other responsibilities and priorities. So, but again, I mean, to this day, it's something I'm actively working towards. I certainly wouldn't say that I'm an expert in it. It's a goal that I'm actively striving towards, but it's challenging to say the least.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, it's something we all continue. My kids are all grown up, but I'm still working on it. Right. How to still support them and focus on them as well as business. So as you're at FSU, I was looking at your resume and your background, and you were involved in a lot of things while you were in college early on.
Yep.
Talk about some of those.
Yeah. Well, so I triple majored at Florida State. I did entrepreneurship, professional sales, and real estate. I also started my first company while I was at Florida State, which was a marketing company. So we would go out and solicit local businesses. We would put together a flyer and we would sell ad space on the flyer. So essentially it was like an 8.5 by 11 high gloss, thick cardstock print. And we would sell, quarters or halves or full pages to these local businesses. And then we would go and hand deliver them to all the students. And the idea was that there'd be some incentive on there, let's say a coupon, right? Or something to drive the business and be able to measure the ROI. So we did that for a while. That was actually when I met my wife. And we were driving down to the printer, which I think was in Orlando, and we were filling up the car. We put so much weight in it that like the rear springs compressed down, and we're rubbing some of the tire off. And so lots of fun lessons. And we were going and delivering 10,000 of these every month on foot, right? So
wow.
it was. It was a good learning lesson, especially on the marketing side of things, which I've sort of parlayed into the real estate side, because we learned so much of working with all these individual businesses to understand what was important, graphics, design, colors, representation, call to offers, all these things, right? That would get somebody to look at it and say, okay, I want to go shop at this business, right? So it was invaluable in the sense that I got to connect with so many local businesses in a short amount of time and really understand the value proposition for each one of them and what was important to them, as well as, again, the marketing, graphic design, all those type of things, which we've obviously moved forward into what we do on the real estate side of things with offering memorandums and, advertisements, that sort of thing. But yeah, so that was the first business at Florida State. And
how'd that work out?
It was good. I mean, it was exhausting, right? We ran it for a couple of years. Again,
did you have employees and everything?
No, it was my wife and I. Yeah. So, I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, it was hard. It was grueling, but we learned so much, and her and I became so close through that process that, it was amazing.
Yeah. You maybe saw the design there of your parents and working together, how that worked,
Yeah.
So that's interesting. So with the with that business, that got you started, and then where'd you go from there?
I took an internship in Winwood about 15 years ago, and this is when Winwood was not Winwood, right? Mm-hmm. It was sort of in its infancy.
I remember that.
It was the Tony Goldman days. He was
he shifted from South Beach to Winwood, right?
Yes, yeah. So he was still around, and it was, kind of his plan for that neighborhood, and you started to see it playing out, but it wasn't quite there yet. So, I would take people on tours, and gunshots would go off, and, the tour was abruptly over, and they were like, "Why are you showing me this neighborhood? Like, you're out of your mind. Get me out of here. Like, this is not where I want to be." I'm like, "No, trust me. Like, it's the next big thing. Like, it's going to be really cool." And they're like, "You're an idiot. Like, we're done. Let's go." So, fast forward, we watched, and we were part of that evolution and really understood and learned from that how to build neighborhoods, and some of the core components that go into it, and the, curation through tenant mix and landlord deliverables, and really understanding, how to attract certain tenants to a neighborhood to, create that spark. And I worked on a bunch of other neighborhoods down in Miami at the time too, right? So Sunset Harbor, Little River.
Who were you working for at that time?
Metro One was the name of the company.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was down there working on all these different neighborhoods.
This is mostly commercial.
All commercial.
All commercial, right?
I've always done commercial. Yeah. And I always wanted to come back up to Fort Lauderdale, right? It's where I'm born and raised. It's where I'm raising my family. And at the time, all my friends post-college, everyone moved, right? Nobody wanted to come back to Fort Lauderdale. It was not the cool
place to believe, right?
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, fast forward and you're like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But at the time, nobody wanted to be here, right? So I looked around and I was like, why? Like why is everyone, LA, New York, Chicago, Miami, right? And it was the culture side of things. Everyone was like, it's boring. Nothing has changed. It's the way that it was when our parents were there. So we looked at that and we're like, okay, there's an opportunity, right? Like we just have to attract the right tenants and talent and, those types of things, the restaurants and bars and art, all of the things that are kind of composed in that cultural element that, let's just say, people are opting to move to Miami versus Fort Lauderdale for, we could have them here too, right? So at the time, I saw a property in Flagler Village. And again, this is similar, go back 10, 12 years ago, Flagler Village was not Flagler Village just yet, right? So I brought up a whole bunch of the clients that I had in Miami, in Winwood in particular, and said, hey guys, here's this opportunity. It's a 18,000 square foot warehouse. It's well located. I think it's got a lot of potential. Here's kind of how I see it playing out. What are your thoughts? And they all came up and they said, you're crazy. It'll never work. It's a dumb idea. I said, okay. And again, these are visionaries, right? These are people that I'm looking up to at this point in my career. I've been in it, 5, 6, 7 years. And I had seen them kind of take a risk on some of these other neighborhoods that are similar in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of parallels between them. And I really believed in Flagler, but I couldn't get anybody on board to do it. So at the end of the day, I decided to bootstrap it. And I decided to do it myself because I couldn't get anyone to do it. None of the clients or investors, felt that it was a sound idea. So bootstrapped it, friends and family, and that was Flagler Uptown. So that was the first development that I ever did.
Okay.
And so you
left Metro One at that point?
Left Metro, yep. Started Native Realty and adaptively.
And that's about 7 years ago or 8?
Yeah, 7 and a half. Yeah. Adaptively repurposed this warehouse. So we brought in Wells Coffee, the Girls Club, Monse Swim, Invasive Species. Fast forward, we renovated this whole building and we brought in all these amazing tenants and we created something really special. And I think originally we probably pro forma'd it out at like $18 a foot modified gross, and it transacted closer to like 25 to 30 triple net, so wow, far exceeded the initial projections. And again, everyone thought the 18 modified gross was like insane.
Was crazy.
Like, you'll never get it. You're an idiot. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. I mean, what were rents there at the time? Probably
12 to 14.
Yeah. Gross.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
But it was industrial. Right. So I had to go to the city and I had to go through the whole change of use process and parking reductions and, all of these things, which was a great learning lesson too, because, having gone through that experience firsthand and learning all those lessons and meeting city staff and having those discussions and understanding what was important to them and what they needed to see. I'm now armed with that information. So when clients come along in the future, right, and they look at a different neighborhood, because fast forward, we've worked on way more neighborhoods than just Flagler Village, right? Mm-hmm. We've done it all throughout Broward and Palm Beach County. I now understand at a pretty high level how and what you need to do, right? So I can help to advise people when they say, hey, this is the property I'm looking at. This is kind of what we're thinking we want to do with it. How do we get there? Yeah. And then it's, well, okay, here's kind of the blueprint, right? Here's some of the hurdles that we're going to encounter and how we're going to clear them and navigate them. And knowing that on the front end, so it's not a surprise later, and budgeting for it and planning for it, the timing and all that stuff will oftentimes dictate the success or failure of a project. Because if a client goes in and they don't realize that, they have to go through parking reductions or change of use or perhaps they're not even going to be able to get their intended use approved at the end of the day for XYZ reason, or impact fees, or you name it, right? There's a lot of things that go into it. They can stumble and fall, or, they didn't budget for it and now things are out of budget and, the project's underwater. So that project alone really solidified so many things as far as, one, a proof of concept, right? After we did that and we hit all those numbers, all those same investors that I had brought up from, Winwood were like, this place is amazing. Like, what can you show me to buy? Like, okay.
Right.
But it put Flagler Village on the map from a brokerage perspective in a big way, where all of those people then came back up and they're like, I understand it now and I want in.
That's incredible, because you demonstrated, because that's not really what you do is development, right? I mean, you do some development, but you're primarily
brokerage.
Brokerage. Yeah. So you couldn't get anybody to buy. So you had to go in and show them how to do it. So that's a great story. Man.
Yeah. So that was phase one. Then phase two was the Hive, which is 2 blocks down the street. Similar property, triangle shape. Same thing, went through that whole process, developed it all, curated all the tenants, created a really cool community there with people that I'm still very close with to this day. And some of my favorite operators are still in that center. And then sort of the culmination of those two was a couple years later, after everything was stabilized, we wound up selling it. And at the time it was a record transaction. So again, was another one of those, kind of defining moments in that neighborhood on a price per square foot basis, for sale and for lease, the comps that were generated, that again put Flagler Village on the map in a very meaningful way, where everyone took notice in the Tri-County. People up in Palm Beach, all the way down to Miami and Winwood, and these very established neighborhoods started to say, wait a minute, this little place called Fort Lauderdale, in between the two, there's something happening here, right? And there's real demand and there's real interest, and so that sort of propelled things even faster as far as the spotlight going on that neighborhood. And I think a lot of the development and interest that occurred as a result after that, because again, it was a case study, right? Once that sale locks in and that price per square foot has been realized, it's no longer theoretical. It's, oh, this is happening, and there's opportunities to continue to develop around it, and a bunch of emerging neighborhoods nearby, right? 13th Street, Studio City, Progresso, Sistrunk, all of those have, kind of gone through their own life cycles and evolutions. And we've been at the tip of that spear on all of those and continue to be. But, that's really what we love doing. And really the passion around what we do is developing these emerging neighborhoods. And, through the curation of tenants and local tenants, typically local and regional tenants, right? Like if somebody calls and like, hey, I want to put a CVS on the corner of Main and Main, I'm like, great, we could do that in our sleep, right? It's not challenging. Like, it's publicly listed information, like where they want to be and who the contact is. It's very plug and play, square peg, square hole. What we love doing is almost creating like an incubator situation, which again was like Uptown was a great example of that. We're going to some of these tenants that don't necessarily they have phenomenal concepts, right? But they may not have multiple units under their belt. So we can go to them and say, hey, look, we believe in this concept. We think you're going to do really well. And we want to give you an opportunity to do it. Because again, a lot of like institutional landlords they won't do it, right? They'll say, look, you don't have X in the bank account. You don't have X number of units.
Same things a lot of banks say.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
We try to be a little different.
Yeah, exactly. More entrepreneurial, right?
Right.
So thinking a little bit outside the box. And by giving some of those tenants the opportunity to get that first foothold, I mean, some of them have exploded and they have multiple units now, right? And they've done so well. And so like, that's super rewarding to be able to sort of help propel these local businesses, careers and business plans from sort of concept into execution.
That must be so rewarding also.
That's amazing.
Because I know for us and what we do, that's what keeps all of us going, right? We want to help local companies. You're doing the same thing, right? Yeah. You're getting a rewarding, not only you're making a good living, you got your family time, but you're also doing something good for our community. You're helping build Fort Lauderdale. You're helping to build this community. So, and you're probably establishing some great relationships with all these local companies too. Yeah,
no, it's unbelievably rewarding. It's the fuel that kind of drives everyone at the company, right? Is like that development, evolution, curation of the city to change it, right? Because if you look back, even just going myopic on a single neighborhood, right? Flagler Village now versus 10 years ago, right? Prostitution, like open air drug deals, you name it, right?
You'd be afraid to go there after dark. Right. You would not be there.
Right. Yeah. And you look at it now, right? So like in that sense, it's unbelievably rewarding to be able to go and visit these businesses, see the owners, say hi to them, know about them, their family, their kids, all of that. And also to help them execute the plan that they have to be able to do multiple units and grow the company and be successful. But then also when you look from a 30,000 foot perspective and you see the change that's occurred, and it's not like, it took 40 or 50 years. I mean, we're talking like intra 5 years. You can look back and you're like, whoa, look at this neighborhood now. Look at where it was and look at where it is now. And again, I mean, that's happened on multiple fronts in multiple places.
Sure.
So
so you really learned it in Winwood.
Yeah.
And then brought it here.
Right.
So kudos to you for doing that. And then for you, and you talk, about your company. Mm-hmm. And so when you started, I mean, how many employees did you have? Is your wife, just you? Okay. Yeah. So you didn't even have your wife this time?
No.
She was probably working, but not officially.
Yeah,
right?
she had her own company.
Payroll.
Yeah. Well, no, she had her own company. She was doing her own
thing. Did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So what is her company? Just as...
She's since sold it, but she's a licensed dietitian and nutritionist. So she had a company that was essentially helping like people that were coming out of rehab to like understand how to eat better, cleaner, to kind of break some of the cycle of addiction, which also can translate into food, right?
Yeah.
As far as like sugar and stuff like that is, will kind of have the same dopamine hits. So she had that and she sold that. And then she transitioned into, we spun up a management company, which I can touch on it later or now, whatever you want.
Go right ahead. Touch right on it.
So the background on the management company, one, I would never recommend anyone to start a management company.
Okay.
But we wanted to be vertically integrated, right? And we had this silo there where, we had the customers and we had the opportunity to be able to spin it up quickly. So we started a management company and I did it with
property management?
Property management, yeah. I did it with a close friend of mine from college. Great guy. Still very close with him to this day. But after a couple months of doing it, he took me to lunch one day and he's like, hey, I hate this business. Like it's terrible. I can't do it anymore. So he's like, I'm out. At the time, Native was continuing at just kind of like a hyperbolic growth rate. And I was like, I can't take my eye off this ball. Right. So, but we have this other thing we spun up, we put our name on it. We have to service it. So my wife, being the amazing person that she is, jumped on top of the proverbial grenade and dealt with it for a couple years. And one day, we were talking and she was like, I hate this business too, right? And I was like, okay, well then we got to get rid of it. Like it's that simple.
God bless James Donnelly. I don't know how, he took that Castle group and, did great. But most people I talk to are like, I hate this business. Oh
yeah. Well, you never get any like warm and fuzzy calls,
No.
Like, thank you for repairing my roof. They're, it's like
my wife was doing it for a while and she says the same thing.
Oh yeah. I don't know how people do it. Especially like veterans that have been in it like 30, 40 years. I'm like, man, you got to have real tough skin because like everyone's always mad when they call.
Yeah.
Never a friendly, like, thank you for this. Thank you for that. It's like just cursing, So anyways, looking back, I would say the biggest mistake that we made was starting that business. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad that we got out of it.
Okay.
And I am mortally grateful to my wife for dealing with it for the years that she did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was sort of the life cycle of that.
So today, how many employees do you have?
35.
35.
Yeah.
So, and you have such a passion for what you're doing and it's evident in talking to you. Yeah. And how does that translate into the culture of Native?
Sure. We're super selective on who we bring into the organization. I would say we probably turn down 9 out of 10 people, not like, in a aggressive way, but just like we're extremely selective in who comes in because we want it to be compatible. At the end of the day, you spend more time at work. Most people do. We do than you do anywhere else. Right. So if you're not happy there and you don't truly enjoy the people that you're spending the time with, you're not really going to be that, it's not going to be that enjoyable.
Right.
So we've been super selective with it. We focus a lot on the culture as far as, the friendships and community that we have and open transparency and honesty and the free flow of communication. It's almost like a hive mind mentality where everyone's sharing information in real time. And the way that the company is structured, everyone's incentivized to do that versus most of the businesses in our field. Everyone is siloed and like, it's all like almost daggers behind the back, right? Like when I talk to people at other firms, they're like, oh yeah, like, I don't like let anyone know anything because like, they're all trying to, like kind of screw me type thing. And I'm like, well, that's crazy. Like you're sitting next to the guy, like, how do you feel that way? Like how does that feel all the time? So again, we've been super intentional on the culture to make sure that not only is everyone friendly and, that everyone's enjoying the time amongst each other, but that the communication is truly in free flow. Because at the end of the day, if you have 35 people with eyes peeled looking for XYZ, right? If you come to, we have weekly sales meetings, right? And it's like, hey, I'm looking for 10,000 square feet of industrial, south of Sunrise, north of Broward, east of 95 with XYZ. Now you have 35 people that are like, oh yeah, like this person has it, or I saw this off market deal, or, I know this guy who knows that. And you're going to connect the dots on it versus when everyone's siloed, right? And like kind of wondering, did they hear me say this or that? Right. Then like, it's just unbelievably inefficient. But again, that's the way the majority of brokerages work.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I've known enough people in your business, right? It's not a warm and friendly environment. It's like
cubicles.
Glenn Ross is more.
Yeah.
But so with building the company, you're still focused primarily on Fort Lauderdale, or what?
No, Tri-County. I mean, Broward and Palm Beach counties are really our predominant focus. Okay. I mean, we still do things down in Miami just by virtue of the time that I've spent down there, and we have clients that have different holdings down there that we go down and service. But I would say 95% of our time and energy is really Broward and Palm Beach County focused.
You took a big jump when you jumped into this building, left your job, decided to buy this building in an old rundown neighborhood.
Yeah.
So obviously there's, you're thinking, well, what if this all goes wrong?
Sure.
Talk about how you dealt with your doubts, your fears, because that's, I think, a lot of people out there are like, oh, should I do this or not?
Right.
What advice would you have for them?
I would say I was very patient before making that decision in that. So a little bit of backstory. So at the time when I was down in Winwood, I was living in a place called Edgewater, which is a neighborhood just to the east of it.
My daughter lives there.
Yeah. So again, like 15 years ago, I was looking at that neighborhood and instinctually I was like, this place is going to explode, right? Like the zoning is there, like it's, on all four sides. If you count, across the water on Miami Beach, I was like, everything's happening around it. Like it's a concentric circle that like is imploding on itself. Right. But I didn't do it because I was new and I was like, I'm not ready. Maybe there's something I don't know, right? Like I haven't been through the full cycle. And when I started, we were kind of at the trough, right? It was like coming out of like the 07, 08 side of things. Yeah, so like everything was hard enough to do or sell. And, I just seen a lot of blood in the street and all that. So I was like, maybe there's some stuff I haven't figured out yet. Pretty new. But I watched that, right? And I waited and I kind of saw happen what I thought would happen. So it sort of validated some of my beliefs. And when that happens a couple times, right? And I'm not saying to wait forever and miss all the opportunities, but I think by doing that, and there were some other things that I saw down there, same thing. I was like, man, I really think this neighborhood's going to explode. You wait and see. And then, again, the belief is validated. You do that a couple times. And then I think that gave me the courage where I looked at it and I was like, okay, I have a fairly high confidence that this will be successful, right? And based upon that, it was a calculated decision to do what I did. And, again, probability wise, I felt very confident that it would work out. And again, hedging downside and stuff with the basis, even if the numbers were slightly lower, right? Again, $18 a foot modified gross is what we pro forma'd, and 25 net is where it actually realized, right? So, I mean, the downside was, like the hurdle was much lower to clear, and then the upside was all, icing on the cake.
Yeah.
I think that by doing that, and again, validating some of the assumptions and being hyper conservative, which we were, you mitigate the downside, right? And the upside's always going to be there, right? But if you can focus on mitigating the downside, I think you're going to be relatively well protected.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
And
because people always look at the upside, right? They're always like, well, if XYZ happens, and yeah, sure. But like, run the model the other way, right? Like flip it on its head and be like, if everything kind of goes wrong, right? Or, XYZ breaks, what am I going to be left with? And if you can bear that model, right? The worst run model, then everything else is icing on the cake and you're going to be good. But, again, everyone always focuses on like, it's the bias, right? Like they only want to see the best model and hope that all the stars align, and rarely does that happen. It's the exception, not the rule.
There's a difference between taking a risk and taking a calculated risk,
right?
And making sure you have that downside covered. So that's great advice. Anything else that you would like to share to help people who are listening who are thinking about doing something similar to what you did?
I would not be afraid to ask questions of people that have done it. Meaning, whether that's like a mentor-mentee relationship or even just reaching out to somebody and being mindful of how you ask the question, right? Because sometimes people will reach out and like there's no thought put into it, right? It's almost like, I don't know how best to describe it. Almost just like they're asking you to do their job for them, right? And obviously that's not going to be well received. But if you reach out to somebody that you respect, right, and that has done what you're trying to accomplish, and you take it with a different approach, right? It's like, hey, can I buy you lunch and like ask you a couple questions about your journey or this or that or what you learned? I'd really love to get some feedback on X, Y, Z. It's a different reception than sometimes people just kind of force it on you, right? It's like, is this deal going to work? And you're like, well, I don't know you. And, like there's really no background there. And, like what, and people kind of get a little bit more cagey because it almost feels like they're being sold something or something's being taken from them. So I think understanding that mentor-mentee relationship and asking the right people the right questions and being thoughtful about it will yield different results. And I think that oftentimes people kind of mistake the two. And sometimes the way that can be delivered almost feels like it's putting the work on the mentor to do their job for them instead of having like thoughtful questions that are well thought out and respectful of their time. So
I think that's great advice because I think most people who've had some success are more than happy to help other people. Most people are successful because they have helped people.
Right.
And so, but I do think you're right. I mean, I think a lot of times it's not well thought out, or
it's a half-baked plan, right?
Yeah. So I think people who are successful are happy to help people who are asking thoughtful questions and are sincere and respectful in how they, because time, right, is the
most valuable commodity,
the most valuable. And so if you're going to take some of your time where you've got family, we were just talking how neither one of us watches sports because, between everything else, there's no time.
Right.
But when you think about taking some of your valuable time to really help somebody else, that's an investment that you're making, and you don't want to waste it. Just like you don't want to waste money, you don't want to waste any commodity, but most important time. So thank you, Jaime. I mean, this has been really an enjoyable conversation. You've had tremendous success at such a young age. I mean, congratulations on everything you've done and the risks that you've taken and what you've done for Fort Lauderdale. I mean, we're a bank here and we have that same mentality, right? We want to help the community. We want to make this a better place. And we look at what you've done and you've done a great job and we want to just help you continue as best as we can too and support you.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys have been an amazing partner. I mean, every time that we refer somebody over, they come back with, just absolutely rave reviews. And it's refreshing to deal with somebody that you can actually get on the phone and returns calls and is proactive versus reactive. And I mean, all the things. So I've been, very, very appreciative of everything that you've done here and the reception that I've gotten when I've referred clients over.
Well, that's great. And I know you and Drew have, you grew up, you surfed together and
we've just known each other forever. And yeah.
So that's a great, Drew Sato, who's our chief lending officer, and Jaime know each other real well. And so that's great. So we want to just ask we go into the lightning round now, where we're just going to hit you with a few quick questions. So everybody gets a different idea about things that you like. Do you have a favorite book that you would recommend to people?
Business-wise, Never Split the Difference. Great book.
I love that book.
Yeah. Have you read it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do the Audible?
Yeah, I listen to it all the time.
The only way to do it. Yeah.
Because the voice is great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. the late night FM. Yeah.
Yeah.
Late night FM
that is a great book, by the way.
Yeah.
Is there a song that you grew up with? I mean, Sound Advice, your parents were, so there's got to be some music in your background.
Oh yeah.
Sure, right?
Lots of Beatles. I mean, the whole Sgt. Pepper album, and we used to listen to that all the time.
Yeah. One song that is like your pump up song, like if you need to be motivated, that you would put on in the car. You're going to close like a huge deal.
Yeah, I'm a little all over the place, right? Like I love the classic rock because that's instilled in me, and then I also love like old school rap. So I mean, I'm all over the spectrum there.
All right. So who knows what that song's going to be? Right. How about if you could have dinner with any person, living or dead, who would that be?
Probably Elon Musk at the moment. Just, I mean, the influence that he has on the world and the companies that he's created and some of the crazy things that he does. I'd like to kind of understand, pull back the curtain and see what's going on in that head of his. But probably him. Yeah.
Did you read it?
His autobiography? No, I haven't.
Yeah. So that's by Walter Isaacson. It's a good read. It's a thick one.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. He's an interesting guy. I don't know if I can even ask you this, but I will. But you can pass if you want to because of all your relationship. But what's your favorite local restaurant?
Heritage.
Oh, wow. Didn't pause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in the Hive, right? So that was, I mean, one of the first tenants that went in there. And I mean, I think he's just an amazing operator. His food is insane and it's delicious.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good one. What's something you're most grateful for today?
Family and my health.
Right. I mean, what is a new skill that you're learning?
Hydrofoiling. So I've been doing it for a while, like where essentially it's like a surfboard that has a hydrofoil underneath it. But then more recently, I've been adding a wing to it. So essentially, it's almost like a sail that you'll use to catch the wind and then use that to be able to fly upwind. So you can kind of just stay out there for hours and fly several miles at a time.
I think I've seen people out there doing it. There's not a lot of you out there.
No, there's not. Yeah, it's a pretty selective sport, but it's changed a lot. Like in the last couple of years, it's evolved very quickly, like the construction materials and the designs and the profiles and the high aspect versus low aspect. And anyway, super humbling. I mean, I haven't, screamed and cursed so many times in a while, but doing that, the initial learning curve is extremely steep, but it's rewarding once you figure it out.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what does success look like for you?
Balance, again, going back to sort of that goal, right? It's a combination of continuing to do what we're doing as a company, build the company, build a platform that elevates everybody and gives them the opportunities to meet and exceed their goals while also being able to spend time with the family and make those lasting memories that I had as a child.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, how can people get in touch with you?
They can find us at nativerealty.com.
Okay.
They can stop by our office in Victoria Park. We're at Sunrise and Federal Highway, 1926 East Sunrise Boulevard, or they can find us on social media, the website.
Your signs are everywhere.
Yeah, all they have to do is walk outside and look around, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thanks, Jamie. You've been a great guest.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to Locality's Making Bank podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform to catch the latest episodes, and visit localitybank.com today to learn more about all the benefits of banking local.